Hello. Today we are going to factor some special cases of polynomials using the difference of squares, the sum of cubes, and the difference of cubes. So factoring using the difference of squares. So what that would look like is you've got something in the pattern here of a squared minus b squared, and then that would factor as you got to think, what's the square root of a squared? It's a, so the a's go in the parentheses there. And then what's the square root of b squared? And that would be b. So then b's would go in there, and then you get a minus and a plus. So then our example over there, let's factor x squared minus 9. So then what we think about is what's the square root of x squared? To be x. What's the square root of 9? It'd be 3. And then one's a plus and one's a minus. That's called the difference of squares. So let's look at some sample problems here. So factor each of these. What's the square root of x squared? It'd be x. What's the square root of 100? It'd be 10. And then one's a plus and one's a minus. Doesn't matter which one is which. You can have the other way around too. I could have said 10 x plus 10 and x minus 10. All right, next one there. What's the square root of 25? It would be 5. What's the square root of v? It would be v. What's the square root of 64? It'd be 8. And then one's a plus and one's a minus. And that only works in this case where you've got two terms and you can find the square root of the first term and you can find the square root of the last term there, and they're connected by subtraction. All right, what's the square root of 36? It'd be 6. What's the square root of m squared? It'd be m. What's the square root of 1? That's 1. And then one's a plus and one's a minus. This only works in the case of two terms connected by subtraction where you can find the square root of the first term and you can find the square root of the second term. All right, so in this case here, they tell you to look for GCF and then factor it. So I'm going to look for GCF in this one here, and I'm thinking, okay, what goes into 12 that also goes into 48? And a lot of times I'm going to think if the smallest number will go inside the larger number. So does 12 go into 48 there evenly? Yeah, it does. So I'm going to pull out 12. 12 goes into 48 there 4 times. So now they want me to factor that, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, that's looking like a squared minus b squared, right? Because I can find the square root of x squared. The square root of x squared, there's x. The square root of 4 is 2. And then one's a minus and one's a plus. All right. And likewise in the next one here. What's the GCF there? What do they have in common? They have a 28 in common. So if I take a 20 out of that first term, I'm left with y squared. If I take a 28 out of that last term there, I'm left with 1. Because I need to be able to multiple distribute the 28 through and get back to 28y squared minus 28. You can't ignore that minus 1 over there. So now let's see if we can keep going with that. I'm going to come back down here again. Is it an a squared minus b squared form? It looks like it. So what's the square root of y squared? It'd be y. What's the square root of 1? It'd be 1. And then one's a minus and one's a plus. All right, so now let's move on to factoring the sum of cubes there. So we're looking there at factoring the sum of cubes there. We have a the third plus b the third. So we've got two terms connected by addition where you can find the cube root of things in here. So I'm going to pull up my calculator here and remind you where the cube root button in there, because eventually we're going to have to take the cube root of 8 down there. So let me put my graphing calculator here. I'm going to get out of what I'm in here, so I'm going to do second quit. And cube right there, underneath the math key. If you look down there, the fourth one down there is the cube root button. So I want to take the cube root button there of 8, and it's going to give me 2. All right, so math, go down to cube root, it ends up being my number 4 one there, and then hit enter there and it'll tell you it's 2. All right, so for instance up here, if you can find the cube root of them, so this first term there is x to the third, so I'd have to find the cube root of x to the third. And remember what we do here, we take this 3 and divide by the 3 out there, and we get x to the first, or just x. And then the cube root of 8 there, you can either think what times what times what gives you 8, and that's 2, or you can put it on your calculator and it's going to tell you it's a 2. So when I did that, my a value ended up being my x, and my b value ends up being 2. So if I plug that through in the formula up here, it goes a plus b, so that's x plus 2, times, it says a squared, so that's x squared, minus ab, so a is x and b is 2, so it's minus 2x. Number goes first, variable goes second. And then plus b squared, and b squared, b is there is 2, and if you square it, you get 4. All right, so let's come down here and let's do one of these. So we want to find the cube root of x to the third. So remember, we can take this 3 divided by this 3 there, and we get x to the first, or 1. So you get x to the first, or just x. And so then that's our a value. How do we find b? You find the cube root of that last term there. And if you don't know, plug that into your calculator. So let me show you how to do that again. So I can go math, go down to the fourth one there, and punch in 125. It's going to tell me it's 5. So the cube root of 125 is 5. So my a is x and my b is 5. So let's follow that formula through up there. It says a plus b, so that's x plus 5, times, in parentheses, it says a squared, so that's x squared, minus ab, so ab would be x times 5, which is 5x, and then plus b squared. Well, 5 is our b there, so if you square b there, if you square 5 there, you get 25. And there we have it. All right, letter B down here. You need to find the cube root of 8x to the third. So again, you can find the cube root of each individual one if you like. You could do this. So the cube root of x to the third there is x. And the cube root of 8 there is 2. So my a is simply 2x. And then I can find the cube root of 729. So let's try that one. So go to your math key there, go down to number 4 there, punch in 729. Hit enter. It's going to tell you it's 9. So the cube root of 729 is 9. All right. So coming up there, using that formula there at the top there, it says a plus b. So our a there is what? 2x. And then plus b. What's b? It's 9. And then it says a squared, so I have to square both the 2 and the x, because a there is 2x. So if you square the 2, you get 4. You square the x, you get x squared, so 4x squared. Minus a times b, well, a is 2x and b is 9. What's 9 times 2x? It'd be 18x. And then plus b squared. What's b? b is 9. What's 9 squared? 81. Done. All right, and then let's try this last one here. So what's the cube root of 64x to the third? So try that out. See if you can put that in your calculator or think through on what that would be. So when you do that, you should get 4. What's the cube root of x to the third? X. So a there is 4x. B, cube root of 1. What's the cube root of 1? It's 1. So our a is 4x, our b is 1. So let's plug them in there. Back up at the top there. Looking at that formula there at the top, a plus b, so that's 4x plus 1, times 4x squared. You have to square both the 4 and the x. That gives us 16x squared. And then minus ab, so that's minus 4x times 1. 4x times 1 is 4x. And then plus b squared, that's plus 1 squared, and 1 squared would be 1. So there we have it. Difference of two cubes, very similar. There's the formula. This time it's a minus b times a squared plus ab plus b squared. The only thing difference between that and the previous formula is those two signs have been swapped. Okay, so just make sure you have those formulas when you're taking your quiz on this and when you're doing your worksheet on this. Just have them written down there in front of you so you can do that. So let's try this one, 8x to the third minus 125. So again, we have to walk exactly the same way. We want to find the cube root of 8x to the third. Again, you can put in your calculator the cube root of 8, or you can think what times what gives you 8, and it'd be a 2. Cube root of x to the third is x. So a there is 2x. Find b, it's the cube root of 125. So go ahead, you can put that into your calculator. The cube root of 125 there is 5. All right, so b is 5. So the formula up there says a minus b. A is 2x, so it's 2x minus 5. Times, another set of parentheses over there says a squared. So you have to square both the 2 and the x. So if you square 2, you get 4. If you square x, you get x squared, so 4x squared. Plus ab, so that'd be 2x times 5, and 2x times 5 is 10x. Plus b squared, that'd be 5 squared, which would be 25. And there we have it. All right, letter B. We need to find the cube root of each of the terms. The cube root of 27, find that out. The cube root of x to the third is x. So a is now 3x. Find the cube root of 216. My guess it's 6, but let's do it for sure. So math, fourth one down there, 216, 6. So my a is 3x and my b there is 6. So let's plug them in there. So it says a minus b times, it says 3x squared, so you have to square both the 3 and the x, so that's 9x squared, plus 3x times 6, which is 18x, and then plus b squared there to be 36. Now we always double check to make sure there's not a GCF in a problem. And this one has one. So, but if you got this far here, I'd give this to you. If you notice a GCF, I'd probably give you some extra credit points for getting this next step here. So here, notice there's a GCF in that first one. They have in common a 3. So then I'm left there with x minus 2. The second set over here, they have a 9 in common. So then if I take a 9 out of there, I'm left with x squared plus 2x plus 4. And then I have to multiply those GCFs together. So that one there that I just circled would be the extra credit one there. But if you got the blue answer there, that would have been just fine as well. All right, let's come down here to letter C. You want to find the cube root of x to the third, which is x. You want to find the cube root of 1, which is 1. Follow the formula through. The formula says a minus b, so that's x minus 1. And then it says a squared, which is x squared, plus ab, so that's x times 1, which is x. And then plus b squared, that's 1 squared, which is 1. And we can't go any farther than that. There's no GCF in either one of those cases. So I can factor using the difference of squares, the sum of two cubes, and the difference of two cubes.